Hello amazing viewers! Did you know that Prague had the largest Stalin statue in the world? Do you want to discover Prague's best sunset and sunrise spots? Then stay with me. I'm Olga, a cheerful tour guide from the invincible Ukraine. The war in my homeland has led me to seek refuge here in the beautiful city of Prague. Every cloud has a silver lining, and that is why we are discovering on my channel the stunning sights and the magical places in Europe together. Subscribe not to miss my exclusive live streams and adventures. Communists were ruling Czech Republic for more than 40 years, and they even tried to change the appearance of the city. That is why here on this place we had the biggest gigantic statue of Joseph Stalin. That was the biggest group statue in whole Europe, and it was so massive. It was weighing 17,000 tons, and it was unveiled in 1955. People joked that it looked like a long line of workers waiting for food, just like they did in real life back then. So people called it the meat queue or meat line. It was really enormous, 15 meters high, 22 meters long, and that was the world's largest representation of Stalin. But times changed, and in 1962 the statue was blown up with 800 kilos of explosives. It stood here just for a short 7 years. Stalin was no longer the hero. Instead, he was seen as a ruthless dictator, and the statue had to go. Clearing away all the trouble took 2 whole months. But in 1991 the city got a new quirky landmark, a 75-foot tall metronome. Metronome, it's like the device that musicians use to keep the time. And this giant one takes away on the same spot where Stalin was once looming over the whole city of Prague. Unfortunately, this device is not always running, but when it does, it's pretty cool to see. Plus, this spot is really the best view of Prague, especially during the sunset and sunrise. The original Stalin statue stayed on this huge pedestal in Letna Park until it was demolished. And when it was unveiled in 1955, it was a big show of loyalty to Moscow. But after the Stalin was accused in mass murder, the statue quickly became an embarrassment. The sculptor Otakar Shvets tragically committed suicide just a few days before the statue was revealed, and we still don't know what was happening in his soul, why he committed suicide, what he was thinking about when he was creating this giant image of the ruthless dictator. What was the life like in Czechoslovakia during the Soviet regime? Life was grey and often ridiculous because communists could never motivate people to do good work, and the city looked grey. Many of the streets were dug up, many houses were under the scaffolding, and most of the construction work took incredibly long time. And even after the repairs were completed, the leftover materials was often left just on the streets and not cleared away. The grey economy was in common, so if you wanted, for example, a color TV or some kind of electronics, you either had to have a salesman as a friend or pay a bribe. The bribe looked ridiculous during the Soviet era. Sometimes you could have surgery earlier than other people because you are a salesperson and you can supply the doctor with the oranges and bananas. So up until November 1989, the country was in constant fear of police. The streets were empty, the stores were empty, the mines were empty, but the fear was present. Informers lived on each block, and they were making sure that nobody said anything bad about the regime. It was like North Korea today, or probably Russia today. You could stay in Prague at Wenceslas Square, the center of the busiest city, at noon, look up and down, and you see the broad street, but you see nobody. Any attempt of revolt would end in sudden death. But why did USSR need Czechoslovakia? Czechoslovakia was a crucial piece of the European chessboard. Its location stretched from the border of Bavaria to the USSR. It was a key route for any Western invasion. Without it, Western Bloc wouldn't have that easy path to Europe. And Russia needs Ukraine now for the same reason. We are standing between the totalitarian Russian Empire and the West. And Russia doesn't need Crimea, Lugansk or Donetsk. It needs the whole Ukraine to establish its grim regime. This is their prime goal. In 1946, communists won the democratic elections here in Czech Republic, but they wanted even more power. They were conquering the police and the interior ministry before 1948. The other democratic parties felt that something is going towards the Stalinist totalitarian regime, and they tried to prevent it. And if communists hadn't come to the power through the somewhat official means and ways, the Soviets would have likely imposed their own leaders because they desperately needed Czechoslovakia. Sadly, some of those people who choose to align with the Soviets, they later faced the tragic end, and they took their own lives. In 1948, the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia, with the Soviet backing, assumed undisputed control over the government of Czechoslovakia through the coup d'etat. And for the following 49 years, up to 1989, all the government was always chosen by the Communist Party, and the decisions were made in Moscow. The first 5 years after the coup were the cruelest. 248 people were executed for purely political reasons, and things began to change and to soften in 1960s when this massive colossal statue of Stalin was demolished. That brought to liberalization processes that finally escalated in Prague Spring in 1968, and that Prague Spring was crushed by the invasion of the Warsaw Pact Soviet troops. And after 1968, Czechoslovakia had 20 more years where people were oppressed, and people who supported the reforms, they were fired, they were harassed, and communism collapsed rapidly in November 1989. That is called Velvet Revolution. Today, Prague is a beautiful European city, a rival to Paris, and Metronome is not necessarily the most beautiful Prague's landmark. It stands tall and proud, like a clock without a face. And you can see it as you approach from the bridge. For me, it's a reminder that the battle for Ukraine is not won, and the Russian president, supported by the population of Russia, who is turning this wheel of war, is continuing the devastation of the free democratic world. The Czechs were smart enough to join NATO when all this Soviet structure collapsed. It was a huge mistake of Ukraine not to do so when we became independent in 1991. Now we're paying for it with our blood. But we are standing as a stronghold of Europe, not letting the evil from there, Russia, to come here to the European soul. Now Metronome is a popular hangout spot for the local youth. They can come, grab a drink, enjoy the stunning views. And when you are in Prague, don't forget to check that quirky spot. It's full of history, and you can enjoy one of the best sunsets or sunrisers in the city. Subscribe to my channel, like this video, and you will travel back in time with me through the charming Europe. Thank you so much for supporting me on Buy Me a Coffee. That makes a great difference to my life as a refugee and my creative journey. I appreciate your kindness and wishing you all the best. See you next time. Bye.